The Philippines on Tuesday said that China has removed remnants of a floating barrier that was severed by its Filipino counterparts at a fiercely contested shoal in the South China Sea, also adding that there was no standoff or signs of aggression as mentioned earlier on. The Philippines had executed a special operation to cut a 300-meter barrier installed by China, which is one of Asia's most contested maritime features, which was a move likely to further strain ties that have deteriorated in the past year. The Coast Guard, who conducted the special operation, said that the Chinese Coast Guards were not that aggressive even after seeing media on board a Philippine ship. What does this mean for China? Was this China being cornered, or does this indicate something which is bigger? We're going to discuss that with our guest. Joining us on the show to talk more about this is Ambassador J.K. Tripathi, former diplomat, Major General G.G. Dwivedi, Global Strategic and Defense Expert, Captain Shyam Kumar, Indian Navy Warship Captain and Naval Instructor and Strategic Expert, joining us on the show as well. And last but not the least, Joyita Basu, Editor of the Sunday Guardian, also joins us on the broadcast. General Dwivedi, I'll begin with you, sir, if you can hear me. General Dwivedi?
Vineet, I can hear you very well.
Right. So this tepid response from China and this intrepid action by Philippines, what does this indicate? Does this show that China in some sense is realizing that every battle cannot be won, or is it playing the waiting game at this point in time? Even the Americans have realized that these are the countries that need their support in their macro aggression against China.
Well, Vineet, we need to understand the Chinese game plan, and Chinese always think through in a very long-term perspective. So first and foremost, it's well known that Chinese have been pressing their claims in South China Sea based on historic facts. But this is only a delusion because they have laid down the 9-dash line, and that implies that whole South China Sea belongs to China is like a Chinese lake. Now, this has been going on right since 1975. When they pushed out the Vietnamese from Parasil, and then they came on further and advanced, deep into the South China Sea. Right now, they almost claim 80% of it. Now, this latest, standoff, I would say, with Philippines, this Scarborough Shoal is about 200 kilometers from the Philippine coast, and in 2012, the Chinese occupied by force. In 2016, the International Court of Justice gave a verdict which went in Philippines' favor, but Chinese never accepted it. In fact, I was that time doing a course at Kennedy School, and Admiral from Philippines was also attending the course, and he was very elated that we'll get back the shoal, but that never happened. Now, what has happened is, of late, especially after Xi Jinping took over, the Chinese aggressiveness has scaled up. And what they are doing is the grey zone warfare. This is what I want to explain. That is, they are using the Coast Guard, militia forces to keep pressing the claims, and they keep probing. And when they find the resistance is strong, then they take a step back. This is exactly what has happened in this current kind of standoff, where China has retracted, but that is only a tactical type of retraction. In the strategic terms, the Chinese are going to continue. In fact, they had a standoff with Malaysia, they have a dispute with Indonesia, with Philippines, with Vietnam. So these are the Chinese tactics. Keep probing. If they get the success, go in for it. If they find resistance is strong, then take a step back. But that's how the Chinese are going to play. And they have been playing, and they'll continue to play until all the Southeast Asian nations come together, especially 6 of them, which have a dispute, and give a befitting response to Chinese. Otherwise, they will keep exploiting the individual nation and keep pressing their grey zone warfare or the 3 warfare tactics. And at the same time, right now, there is a meeting which happened of these Pacific islands. And America has now stepped back because America is a Pacific power, and they realize the Chinese are actually extending their influence in these Pacific islands. And that right now, the Americans have now stepped up, and they are in fact given recognition to the Cook Island and the New. So therefore, all I can say is we need to watch Chinese very carefully. They have a long-term plan. They will keep playing the games and take one step forward, one step back, and to keep doing the foxtrot but at the end of it, they only respond to the force. And I'm glad the Philippines stood their ground and Chinese have to retract in this case. Vinny.
All right, Joyita, what do you make of this? Our nation's finally standing up to this Chinese aggression, which has long been going on in the South China Sea. You know, they have erected and they have constructed artificial islands. They have trespassed sovereign boundaries and borders as and when they pleased. This tepid response by, or in fact, after what Philippines did, is this indicative of something?
Well, it is a case of calling the Chinese bullies bluff. And I would say India, I think gradually, India's influence is coming into this area, because all of these countries, they are realizing that, you cannot let the bully have a free run. You have to stand up to the bully. And that is what India is doing. Ever since 2020, India has not given an inch to them after that incident that took place. China thought it can intimidate people, it can intimidate countries and get away with it. But China was taught a lesson at Galwan. China is still learning, that you cannot bully India. And the thing is, it's basically giving courage to a lot of people. And the very fact that India is also now kind of getting closer to these people. Think of the number of maritime exercises we are continuing with all the South China Sea powers. I mean, comes a time when everybody will stand up and say enough is enough. And the very fact that the Chinese could not do anything after what the Philippines did, it shows that China, in spite of all that material, defense material, all those military equipments, all those fancy navy ships, it does not perhaps have it in the fighting spirit. It can do a lot of muscle flexing, which it is doing, for example, surrounding Taiwan. Now, the very fact, but in real terms, they will be threatening, they will be crossing the median line, they are taking their aircraft over the Taiwanese islands. So, they are doing a lot of threat. But are they empty threats or not? While it should not be taken lightly, but the fact is that the minute countries start standing up to China, I think the bully will have to go back home and sit out for some time at least.
Ambassador Tripathi, thank you for joining us. I hope you can hear me, sir. Ambassador Tripathi?
Yes, I can hear you.
So do you think that countering China, sending a message to China, who has been a bully in certain parts of the world, is very much necessary? And with the backing of the Americans, the formation of the Quad, and the sentiment that we have seen for India in the G20, it is all becoming a reality for the smaller nations which have been tormented by China in the past.
Well, you see, now, as the previous panelist has observed, now the time has come when China has to be told that enough is enough, and bullying will not do. And to strengthen that, Quad has to be further strengthened. More exercises are needed. And as I see that US Pacific Island Forum Summit took place yesterday, where a lot of path-breaking initiatives were announced by the US. And if these initiatives come into the translation, then certainly China is going to have a tough time in South China Sea or Pacific Island region, because you see they have got a base in Solomon Islands, but US has recognized Cooks and Niue Islands as independent nations. It has announced a slew of funding and development assistance in all those nations in many areas, and they are going to open embassies in Vanuatu and Kiribati as well. So, and Papua and Free Federation States also will have, especially Free Federation States, Micronesia, Republic of Mauritius and Palau will also have very soon American embassies or American diplomatic missions. Plus, plus America has increased its presence in Pacific by means of by means of assisting them to fight with climate change, training their military officers in America, and um, I mean positioning its coast guards, U.S. coast guards in Pacific Island nations. So this will certainly put a barrier, or this will be certainly able to contain China to a little bit. But I am sure that these initiatives are going to take time. So the idea is, or whatever best way will be to keep the pressure mounting on China through quads, through trade restriction, through military presence, through this maritime exercises, joint exercises, and through geopolitically putting pressure via, say, ASEAN or G20 and BRICS as well. Where though US is not involved in BRICS, but yes, since India is a member of these two, we will have to and keep on mount pressure on China in order to make it buckle down from its high position of Central Kingdom, or this doctrine Xi Jinping announced when he came to power. Yes.
Captain Kumar, thank you for being with us. We've talked about this Chinese aggression in the past as well. The Americans continue to support these nations, but the fact of the matter is that these steps at this point in time are perhaps too little to scare off China. Do you think there is going to be a coalition of countries, so perhaps even the ASEAN countries, who will look positively at the step that the Philippines has taken?
Exactly, Vineet. Thank you. You have said what I wanted to say, almost there. You see, there has been a little bit of tilt in the Pacific region in the case of strengthening of the local governance. That is, the countries which are around these islands who have been having maritime border disputes with China, Taiwan, Philippines, Malaysia, even the Australian and New Zealand, Solomon Island, Fiji, now this your Scarborough Shoals, which is all this is in news. As far as the Philippines is concerned, I would take it one by one. This Philippines had a pro-Chinese presence a few years back. Ever since that has been removed, and then these countries are being strengthened, the Philippines have taken themselves to the stand at the Pacific region, and they are trying to thwart any attempt of China's aggression in this area, of this removing of this barrier which happened 2 days back, and Coast Guard presence, and taking up the anchor and cutting off the fencing, and thereafter the Chinese Coast Guard are removing it as a major response, saying that it was disturbing their lagoon. So it's a tactical issue, but there is a point here that Philippines have done it. So apart from US presence, Quad presence of Australia, Japan, India, and USA in Pacific, the Vietnam, Malaysia, other small islands, like recognition of New and Scarborough nations as a sovereign nation by USA. What does it indicate? It indicates that USA is there. They are the superpower and showing their presence by maritime exercises and carrier fleet operating around Taiwan always, with Japan and South Korea supporting them. But the nations, like panelist says, ASEAN, the local bodies, they are being strengthened. INS Kripan from India was gifted to Vietnam few months back as a naval presence to be shown in that area, strengthening of naval fleet of these small countries by indirect support. So what is all this happening is the local strengthening, because the 200 nautical mile maritime zone, exclusive economic zone of Philippines is being disputed by China. They don't agree. They all have their own, lines drawn. Philippines has its own lines drawn. China has its own claim line drawn, and the Malaysia has its own. Spratly Island has been of dispute for a very long. So unless these countries come together and they start showing their own defensive posturing against the aggression of China, it will be difficult for USA to always carry out operations or support them. So in nutshell, I would like to say here that there is a new shift in this area, wherein while China is also attempting to go to South China Sea at Solomon Island and carrying out many more operations in that area, all these nations together are going to look after themselves and defend their own maritime borders. So that would be probably a better way to thwart any attempt of maritime disputes or aggression of China.
Right. And Jal Dwivedi, do you think that there is an opportunity here for India, if any at all?
I think there is a great opportunity of India. I like to make three very subtle points. First and foremost, in today's, when we talk of security, the tactical action has strategic ramifications. Take it Galwan, there are tactical actions, but they have strategic ramifications. So the action by Philippines, I think, has strategic message for China and for the global polity at large. Secondly, today we are looking at Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific, these ASEAN countries, they are actually the eastern flank of Indo-Pacific. And here, as you asked me, as to what India's role, I think India is already playing a great role. We sold off the BrahMos to Philippines. We are setting up a, SU, the overall base in Malaysia. And as Sham brought out, we gifted a frigate to Vietnam. So we are doing capacity building. Today is all about capacity building. And capacity building gives a great message. Once you have the capacity, you can push back. And the Chinese are being pushed back because gradually the capacity being built up, and India is playing a different role. And one point I like to make is that India has a very great, deep goodwill in ASEAN countries. And it's time that we need to exploit the goodwill, not only in rhetorics, but in action. And therefore, I think our talk of Act East actually need to get greater traction. And thirdly, as Indo-Pacific, member of Quad, as the biggest navy that we have in Indian Ocean, I think India has a great role, and India will be playing a role because this is in our strategic interest, and stronger ASEAN is like a well-secure eastern flank, and we must ensure that ASEAN countries are given capacity building, are strengthened, because that's where the pushback to China will begin when the shift of focus comes to Indo-Pacific. Vineet.
All right. Joyita, the shift to Indo-Pacific is perhaps already started as a result of these endeavors by countries like Philippines, who perhaps, may not speak against China at the level India and the Americans have done in the past, but definitely have a history of torture, have a history of being bullied by China.
Yes, in fact, all the China has a maritime dispute with all the countries of the South China Sea. And you see, Philippines in particular, they won that case in the International Court of Justice, if I remember correctly, against China on the 9-dash line. But what did China do? It did not follow the ruling. It just went about it as if it was business. So number one, that is there. If you remember what had happened in 2012, the Scarborough Shoal affair, where China just occupied what was actually Philippines territory. And what did Mr. Obama do? Mr. Obama was the president of the US at that time. He just turned a blind eye to it. In fact, by his inaction, he allowed the Chinese to get away with their belligerence. He allowed the Chinese to be what they, to basically grab around territory, and apart from that, flexing muscle, building all these artificial islands and all. So China was kind of, going around running amok. So let us hope that a similar situation like this is not repeated. Now, if Mr. Biden or the US in general is has learnt its lesson, let us hope it will back the countries in the ASEAN. As for India, what it can do is that India can be the net security provider for the region. So I think that way India's role is very important. India's ships can be plying through those waters. Already China has been objecting to Indian ships in the South China Sea area. But the very fact and India is a big power when you compare it with India and that ASEAN region, the smaller countries, India is a pretty big power. In fact, there has been talk that when you are getting into the Quad, maybe for the Quad plus, you can get in Philippines and all these other countries that are standing up to China. In fact, Mr. Biden's visit to Vietnam also was primarily focused on China, the last one when he went from India to Vietnam. Now, apart from that, what is happening is, you see, it's a good place where India can sell its defense material. India is already selling its BrahMos missile to Philippines. Of course, it's a different matter that the range is much shorter, primarily because I think Philippines is not a signatory to that missile control regime. But apart from that, I mean, these countries need to be armed. These countries need the backing of big powers. Of course, the US is a big power, but it's at a pretty far off distance. Even if you are coming from the Pacific, it's quite far off. Compared to that, India is almost next door. So that way, India has a big role to play in this particular region. And let's hope, this is why you have to, I mean, if you're going to increase the Quad and make it Quad plus and all, so you need some kind of, even if it is not a formal security alliance for the region, what we need is some kind of a security partnership for the region, so that all countries, the smaller nations also have, they feel confident enough about standing up to China.
Right. Ambassador Tripathi, concluding thoughts, sir. India should obviously diplomatically engage more with some of these countries who haven't found a voice in a number of forums that India is, of course, a part of now, including Quad Plus would be a good idea.
And I think during India's presidency, the voice of Global South that was announced, and the meeting was held by India, and that should be used to leverage our position there in Pacific Island, Pacific Ocean area. And we know that, and I think my colleague from Navy will substantiate if I am not wrong. Indian Navy is still not a match for Chinese Navy, but combined with power of US Navy, probably we can exert our pressure, we can make our presence felt and felt badly by China in Pacific region, and thereby compelling China not to take any dire steps. So that is one. The second is, we really involved with all the ASEAN regions, even if it comes to the ASEAN to the Quad plus. So ASEAN regions, we have been giving them arms and ammunition, and I think we should involve them more in exercises, in exchange of arms and ammunition and officers, in exchange of information, real-time information, so that becomes a major preventive. That becomes a preventive measure for China for time to come. And Japan sitting in the north and Australia almost in the south, south and east, it will be difficult for China to keep on doing what it has been doing so far, changing 9 pins to 10 and not accepting, rather outright rejecting the international court's judgment against China in favor of Philippines. So this is the high time that we should have more aggressive policy towards Indo-Pacific, so that we can tell China in no uncertain terms that, look, now it is not time for your country to, now it is time for your country to behave properly and not stop your hegemonic expansions once for all. Yes, Vinny.
Right, Captain Kumar, the Indian Navy versus the Chinese Navy. First of all, your thoughts on that, and of course, the fact of the matter is that even if India was supposed to take on China all by itself without the American help, how would we fare?
Ambassador brought out it very diplomatically. The strength of Chinese and Indian Navy, it is well known that China is rapidly increasing its naval power day by day. With the third aircraft carrier on the anvil, they will be having a strong force. They have submarines, and their presence in South China Sea is evident. So tomorrow, when we look at the Indo-Pacific scenario and we look at a major naval power which can have a defending or forwarding the attempt of the Chinese Navy, then we need to think of a blue water naval fleet with aircraft carrier and support ships and submarine plying through Malacca Strait regularly into the South China Sea, Pacific region, and replacing American presence in that area on a regular basis. And for that, we need to increase our naval ships capabilities, aircraft carrier, which is coming up, third one, which we are looking forward to, submarines, nuclear submarines with a larger petrol capability, like we had one, which we just demonstrated by sending a submarine to Australia for the exercise, 7,000 kilometers flying from India to that country. So this kind of strategic message which must go. Why was this done? Because of P8I and this submarine which exercised in these islands of Australia. Because we need to show our naval presence in that area. In fact, we always have some of the ships in Pacific regions these days, but for a credible deterrence with the nuclear powered submarine and the nuclear capable ICBMs of the submarine, SSBN, and aircraft carrier, sea control, sea denial of Malacca Strait or any state that we need to take advantage of, we would have to increase our naval capabilities. Secondly, strengthening our bases in this area, supporting them by arms, ammunitions, training, and soft power, that the cultural power that we have with them, the integration of ancient days, the historical, the integration that India has with these countries, this also needs to be used to develop a place of goodwill, a force for good, not force for expeditionary designs like China does, so that this country look at us big brothers, and then we all fight together against the Chinese aggressive designs.
All right,
Can I
sir.
make a quick point?
All right, quickly, sir, quickly.
Yeah, I think the Chinese Navy, their way of expanding, I think it's a real threat. Today, 350 ships. Tomorrow, it will be 450. I think we need to take three very important, cognizances. Firstly, Gowada will be a base. Djibouti already is a base. There's a base coming up in Chittagong and in Myanmar. I think Chinese Navy can be only tackled with the collective effort of Indo-Pacific powers. And for that, we need to come together, because otherwise Chinese threat is growing faster than expected, Vineet.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.